So just a reminder that this is being recorded, just so I can make it available for others as well. I just really want the parish to understand what we're talking about and what's involved in this whole project. And I really want to communicate it very well and give people a good opportunity to explore and understand what's going on there. So let me start by praying as we gather together. Lord, we give you thanks for this time together this evening. We ask for you to be with us as we go through this conversation and as we look to the future. May you be the one guiding us. May you give us vision. May you give us good understanding of how you would have us move forward. And so, Lord, through your people, as we come together, we pray that your will would be known. We pray this in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Right. So I'm going to share my screen, which means you probably won't be seeing too much of me for now. Right. So hopefully that's come up for you.
Yep.
All looking good?
Yes, good.
Great. Okay. Right, so the Renwick Housing Project. So I'm going to go through a whole history and just really communicate everything, even if you've heard it all before. The Renwick Housing Project came out of a vestry meeting that we had, or retreat that we had about 3 years ago. And the idea was tossed out as we're dreaming of possibilities for the future. What could it look like if we made use of the front bit of lawn? What could we do there? And the idea was cast about putting a couple of houses or units out there for social housing. And the idea, well, vestry sort of supported it well. It didn't really gather any legs, so to speak, and it didn't go anywhere. And it came up over the next couple of years a couple of times in vestry as you know, should we explore this, shouldn't we? And eventually at the beginning of this year, it really seemed to be appropriate as New Zealand became more and more aware of a housing crisis, that we could potentially do a little something in this space. And so we decided to explore a little bit further. And that's where all this has come from, really. So what we're talking about is the establishment of probably 3, maybe 4 1 to 2 bedroom homes at the front of the property at Renwick. So this is just a first concept of what it could look like and where those houses could be placed. So you can see where they would be on the property over towards the letterbox and the boundary alongside the backpackers. So from this meeting, just want to be very clear on where I'm going. One, I want to present the project and talk through all the aspects of what we're looking at. And I want to also allow good opportunity for discussion and opportunity for questions to be raised, any concerns. Hopefully I'll be able to address them. If not, then I can add those to the questions to go away and further explore. All this is to ensure that those attending the special general meeting that we are planning for the first weekend or first Sunday in November is well informed for all those attending, that we can make a good decision without a whole lot of questions coming up that we may not have answers to, and then having to not be able to make a decision. So that's the idea behind this presentation, to give all the information now. As I've been working through this over this year, this verse from Isaiah 61's come to mind a few times. The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives and release from darkness for the prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favour. And so as I've been exploring, the question sort of been sitting in my mind has been, what does it mean for the poor to to have housing or to not have housing, for those who are captive to limited finances. How can we support them? How can we really proclaim favour and blessing in a small way to a limited number of people, but in a very real and practical way for those people? So how can we bless them? And I really do see this project as being a blessing for those that we engage with from our community in providing housing. As we've explored, just trying to find my piece. There it is. As we've explored as a vestry, been very aware that there's been a couple of outcomes that we're very keen on seeing. The first one is that we want to be good stewards of the land that we have and the resources that we've been entrusted with. A few years ago, we did a series on stewardship, and we looked at Psalm 24. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it. And when we remember this and think about what we have been given as a parish and entrusted into our hands, I think it's important that we realise that what we've been given does belong to God. And so how can we use that wisely and invest it both for financial return, but also for social return? How can we use what we have for the benefit of others? So being good stewards. Second outcome we're looking for is to engage with a community need, that being housing. And as we're all very well aware, there is a housing crisis which our country is facing. So we're wanting to engage there in a very real, though limited way, but potentially what we're doing is giving I guess a way of engaging and pioneering something that could be used elsewhere. And already the diocese has shown a lot of enthusiasm about this idea, and already they have approached all the other parishes in the diocese around whether they have land available for similar projects. And I think as we go forward as a country, we're going to see more and more community providers providing housing, whether that be churches or other organisations, because housing is becoming unaffordable for an individual family. So we're going to be needing to look and explore alternative ways of providing homes for people. So as a church, we are very actively engaging in a community need. The third outcome is offering very real support and fellowship to potentially those who might otherwise be isolated. So if we think of offering these homes out to individuals, potentially elderly or retired, but by themselves. And we do know that in that generation, as they maybe lose a spouse or move out of the workforce, then people can become quite isolated. And so by providing a little housing group of houses together of people of similar age, hopefully there will be a little bit of community that is formed. But also as a church, we can give some community, some fellowship to those people as well, supporting them in their needs where we can, but not overburdening ourselves, doing what's realistic. So offering support and fellowship. And the fourth outcome that we're looking for in this project is a long-term revenue stream for the parish. Been very aware for a number of years that this parish is outperforming when it comes to giving. For the number of people that we have in our parish, we are probably the smallest parish in the diocese that is maintaining full-time ministry. And that is very much to do with our people and their giving. So we are very, very blessed in that. So just got to keep that in mind as well as we go forward into the future, that if we lose 2, 3 of those key families for whatever reason, then actually this parish may become unviable to sustain full-time ministry very easily. So we need to look at alternative revenue streams. And again, this is something that the diocese is exploring. How can we help parishes bring in new revenue streams that aren't so reliant on our people providing the finances to sustain ministry and mission? So those are the outcomes of the project. And I think we will see clearly that this project does cover all those quite well. As I've explored, one of my first conversations was with a building company. I've approached Glenroy Homes, which is a company here in Blenheim, just to initially discuss and sort of use as a bit of a sounding board and have a conversation on what these houses could look like. And so out of that, I expressed a vision for a home. We want to have homes that are low maintenance and easy care. This is for the benefit of those who move into these homes, but also it keeps the maintenance costs low and reasonable for the parish to maintain in the long term. It also means a minimal maintenance impact. So if there's a lot of maintenance going on all the time, year after year, then the people living in those houses are impacted in their living experience by that maintenance. So we want a good, strong home that is low maintenance. We also want to explore a model in which the house could easily be resold and relocated if at any point the project became detrimental to the ministry or the viability of the parish. So we don't want to be in a situation where these houses become a burden to the parish. So we want a way that we can, I guess, effectively on-sell the project without it being a detriment to the parish. So by building on piles, because they are small homes, they could be uplifted very easily and resold, relocated at some point. So yeah, you never know what might happen in the future. We might decide to build something different out the front, or there might be a new vision, and we need to allow space for it to happen without our decisions now taking away future possibilities. The third thought there for a vision for a home, we want to ensure a healthy, environmentally friendly home. So including the best use of natural warming and cooling, keeping low power usage where possible. And this is very much to the benefit and blessing of those who move into those houses. We're very aware that a lot of housing in New Zealand is substandard by an international level, and we're wanting to ensure that what we build is going to be healthy and a home that really feels like a good home for those who are living within them. So that may also mean taking or making use of solar energy as well in the future, whether that's straight away or later on, but definitely making sure that that possibility is built into what we do. We also want to incorporate some of the advantages of community living, so a group of people living close together, while at the same time maintaining that individual space and privacy. So community may be created through potentially a shared outdoor space or garden, so it's space to come together, but also that space for privacy. So shared utilities obviously is going to be shared water, but we can also look at shared internet. You know, 3 people by themselves don't need 3 internet and phone connections. That could easily be one connection for all 3 houses, and so therefore saving money again for those people that are in there, providing good quality service at low cost. Potentially that could be included in the actual rent cost as well, without making a huge difference to potential income. So those sort of ideas can be explored. And again, solar power, putting solar power on the roofs and having shared solar power energy across the 3 or 4 houses, keeping those power costs low for everybody. Again, just supporting those who are living there. So overall, we want homes that are welcoming, efficient and desirable to live in. You know, houses that people are happy to brag about being in. You know, that would be great that these houses are known to be good, to be a good model of what can happen when a church and ministry gets behind some social housing. Last year as a parish, Vestry articulated our values for a parish, and we had 3 values that we felt were well articulated to define our parish. And one of them was we value God's call to bless others. So we are called to bless and proclaim blessing upon the people, places and spaces that we are sent to in response to the Spirit's leading. And I believe that this project very clearly fits within that this will be a blessing to those who can live in these homes, but also because of the financial returns, which we'll look at shortly, it will be a blessing in other ways as we can use that income in the future for further ministry and mission in our community and wherever else we choose to use it. So it is about being a blessing and seeing this as a valuable way of being a blessing within our community. So it ties in with our values of who we are as a parish. The costing. Now, these costs were given to me 6 months ago, and we are aware that with the restrictions and with costs in our country at the moment, that building costs have gone up. I have heard that building materials alone have gone up 50% over this year. So these costings do need to be looked at again, but they give us I think, a good starting point. So initially it was said between $175,000 to $200,000 per house. In all my calculations that I've used that we'll see shortly, I've used the cost of $200,000. So at that far end, which I think is probably a good, reasonable starting point at this point. It may be a little bit more than that now. So I've talked about a projected project cost, so the entire project of between $650,000 to $700,000. So I've allowed in there for at least $50,000 for other costs. Now, in my conversations, I've been very aware that this is not something we want to do by ourselves, and if we can find help, so much the better. And I've been attending the Marlborough Housing Forum, which is organised by Marlborough Council, and through that I was able to get in contact with the Christchurch Methodist Mission, who have houses here in Marlborough and are desperately trying to find more houses that they can use for social housing. So the Christchurch Methodist Mission has experience in the community housing sector. So they provide a number of houses, as I say, here in Marlborough, but also Christchurch and a few other places around the South Island. As a authorised community housing provider, they have access to government funding. So what this means is we can do this project as social housing. So for those who are on low income, who are struggling to find good housing or adequate housing. However, because they are a government housing provider, the government tops up what they can pay to what would be considered a market rent. So if they can pay, say, $200 or $250 for weekly rent, the government would come in and pay the remainder up to what was considered a full local market rent. Speaking with the Christchurch Methodist Mission, they believe that a good 2-bedroom home, like what we're looking at, could potentially bring an income of between $450 to $500 per week. And I was quite surprised at that figure. And I actually said to her, "Are you sure that's correct?" And she said, "Yes, we can definitely look at that." as being a realistic projection. In the figures, again, as we come to the budget, I've used the lower amount there, so the 450. So I've used the higher cost and the lower income, and that's taken at today's market rent, not including any sort of increases that may come in the future. The Christchurch Methodist Mission would also look at a long-term lease. So they would lease the houses long-term from us, and then they would provide them to tenants who are on the social housing list. Now, because they're a community housing provider, they need to take people that are from the social housing list. However, unlike the government community housing providers who have to take from the top of the list, the Christchurch Methodist Mission and others like them can actually choose anybody from the list, which means that we can have a small say in who would come onto the church property to live. So it means that we can potentially look at a group of candidates and say, well, we think these people would potentially fit into what we can offer with what we're running here at the church. So people who might be inclined to get involved with men's shed or the market, or who might want to come along to church, people that might be needing a little bit more fellowship that we could provide, rather than people who might just live there but disappear through the day because they're still working or otherwise. So it just means that we've got a little bit of a say in who comes and occupies these homes, which I think is important for us going forward. So it's a long-term lease. They will guarantee 52 weeks per year full market rent. So we're not talking about issues when someone might move on, or a tenant might move to a different place and we might be without a tenant for a few weeks looking for somebody else. The Christchurch Methodist Mission will cover those that rental cost for 52 weeks of the year, regardless of whether they've got someone in there or not. So it guarantees our return, and it makes it easier for us to ensure that we can repay the loan which we will need to make this viable. The Christchurch Methodist Mission also have minimal or no rental management fees. Now, most rental management companies charge around 8, 9, 10% of a weekly rental income for their services. So that's 8, 9, 10% of our income, which would just go straight out to maintain management fees. The Christchurch Methodist Mission don't charge that. So they initially told me that they wouldn't charge any fees. However, I have built in to the budget a management fee of 2.5%. So that is well below the normal management fee, but I thought it prudent to at least build in something to start with, to include in our budget. And the Christchurch Methodist Mission also have the ability to offer some wraparound support services to tenants. So they can provide some pastoral support, financial budgeting services, basic healthcare advice, sort of basic things like that. They're not experts, but they have the right connections. And so it would mean that as a parish, there'd be no expectation for us to have to provide those sort of services or support to tenants. That would all be covered by the Christchurch Methodist Mission. In effect, it would mean with this partnership that everything is taken care of, and we have to do very little except maybe authorize a little bit of maintenance from time to time. So I think a very good partnership. The next partnership that I've explored is with the Nelson Anglican Diocese. I indicated earlier that they're very keen for this project. They see it as sort of a pioneering project within the diocese, and are very keen for other parishes to explore similar in similar ways. After a number of conversations, we've got to the point that the Diocese Trust Board would potentially provide a loan for the full amount of the project. So $650,000 to $700,000 loan from the trust board. Now, this would mean that interest would need to be paid on the loan. However, when we look at this interest, the loan itself is coming from parish funds across the diocese. So the 24 other parishes around our diocese have funds tied up in various trusts, and a certain number of those trusts need to be what they call on call, so available at short notice. So they tend to sit in the bank and get extremely low return on interest. There is a possibility that this project could use some of those funds and therefore provide a higher interest rate to those parishes across our diocese. So therefore, this parish would be of benefit to all the other parishes in our diocese in a small way, but a significant way. And I think that's important to keep in mind as well. So we would probably be paying close to a normal market interest rate of what banks are currently charging. However, with that does come the guarantee that we can go to the trust board and negotiate those interest rates if circumstances change or if there are issues. But keeping in mind that we are supporting the wider diocese in doing this. So it's a win for the diocese in this as well. And as I say, the diocese sees this as a pioneering approach to the use of the trust funds which the diocese has, and brings both financial and social return for the investment. So it brings a lot. So the Christchurch Methodist Mission and the Nelson Anglican Diocese are the two partnerships that we're looking at, and would make this project extremely viable. It means that as a parish, it is potentially not going to cost us anything except for the use of our land and a little bit of time making it all come together. We could, if we choose, put some of our trust fund, our general endowment fund, towards it. We've got around $60,000 sitting there. There would be pros and cons of doing that. Obviously, it would bring down the overall mortgage, and we could repay that endowment fund once the mortgage has been fully repaid. So it would just mean repaying the mortgage probably be at 3 years, maybe 4 years quicker, and just getting a bit of a quicker return into the parish. But to be explored, whether there's good financial benefit in that or not, I'm not sure. So some options there still to look at. So I did send out a PDF, and the PDF does have a copy of this budget. Hopefully you're able to see on your screens big enough. I know that it is small when you're looking at it on your screen. But what we have here is a basic budget of the income and expenses, and then potential mortgage repayments done at 3%, which is low, and 6%, which we could be looking at in a few years' time. However, conversations I've had don't expect it to go over that anytime soon. So I think we're looking at a reasonable balance there between the 3% and the 6%. Then on the right-hand side, we've done mortgage repayment period. So I've done it over 12 years, over a 15-year loan, over a 20-year loan, and a 25-year loan, just to break out the figures and give us an idea on what a budget would look like over those loan periods. So we would pick, and it would be negotiable, how many years the loan would be, and potentially it could be renegotiated later on as well. But this gives us a good idea of where things are at. Now, this page that we're looking at is based on $650,000 project costs. And we will see that if the mortgage repayment stays at around 3%, we will fully pay back the mortgage in 15 years. Okay, so we can see a total rent on the top line of just over $1 million. Total expenses for the houses of 171,000. Then we've got in the bracket under that is the mortgage repayment, which is 979,000 for the 15 years. Now, that is using the minimum mortgage repayment calculator, which means there is still an excess of income over expense at this point. So we've repaid the minimum mortgage. We still, if we take it out over 15 years, have a surplus of 73 or close to $74,000, which would mean that over those 15 years, the parish could take a few $1,000s each year to help with expenses, or we could put it towards repaying the mortgage a lot quicker, which would bring it down with those figures, I think, to about 12, be less than 12 years, I think. But yeah, so that would, so I just wanted you to clearly see that as much as there's a income and expense and mortgage repayment, there's also a line in there which includes returns to the parish from day one. That is just a possibility depending on how we negotiate the mortgage. But it does mean that there is a potential financial return from day one for the parish to help with expenses. And I'll break those down a little bit more shortly. We can see there that if the mortgage repayment goes up to 6%, that we can't repay it in 15 years. However, we can repay it in 20 years. And we'll see that if we take out a repayment over 20 years at 6%, there's a return to the parish of $60,000 over that period, or if it was 3%, it'd be $300,000. So good potential return. And again, if we extend it out over 25 years, there's potential for return to the parish over the period of the mortgage of between $500,000 and $200,000. So the longer we draw out the period of the loan, the more the parish can have from day one in return. That makes sense? Hopefully. we'll come back to questions, but yeah. So hopefully that makes sense. The next page that was sent out was all those calculations done on a project cost of $700,000. So you can see it's still doable under 15 years, although if the mortgage percentage rate goes up, we might be looking closer to 20 years. But still a very viable project over a 20-year period. So this is broken out the income for the parish. So this is what I was talking about, the income to the parish from day one after minimum repayments. With a 3% mortgage rate over 15 years, we'd be looking at just under $5,000 per year, or a total of $73,000 over the entire term of 15 years, etc., etc. there. Obviously, that return is a lot less if the mortgage rate's higher, but potentially still very significant income for our parish in the short term. Now, if, or should I say when, the mortgage is fully repaid, the annual income on those rental properties will be around $70,000. The annual expenses, $11,000, or around 16%, which gives a parish income of just under $60,000 per year. Yeah, complete income. Now, these figures on that page are at today's market rent of $450. It doesn't take into account the increasing mortgage, the increasing rent prices that will incur over the coming years. So remembering that we get a market rate on our properties, which means that they will be increasing with the market year upon year. So potentially that parish income could be significantly higher in 20 years' time than what it shows there. That income is not taxed. We are not taxed on that income as a what are we?
Charity.
Yeah, as a charity, as a non-profit. So we don't pay tax on that, which means that that is full income. And from what I understand, we don't pay GST on the expenses, or most of the expenses. So that keeps the costs low and keeps the income high. So potentially we are in a better position to be offering social housing than most individuals, families or businesses who have to pay tax. So that means better return potentially for the parish, which means more to be invested into mission and ministry in future years. But also, as I said, I want this to be a blessing to those who come into these homes. So how can we use a little bit of that return to benefit them? Covering costs like internet and phone, maybe helping subsidise the installation of solar, which will in return keep their costs low, giving them more to live on. So blessing in that sort of way. So I see this as sort of a win-win for us, but also the tenants. And I think that's important for us to keep in mind. Now, what have we got? So that's sort of the end of the presentation. Where are we? Now I'm just going to stop there. Here we go. Stop the share so you can see me. So with all the investigation and with all I've presented there, it looks very feasible and it looks like it should work. However, we do need to be realistic and saying that something could potentially go wrong, and we may get left with a project which is no longer viable. We need to keep that in mind. It may mean that we don't get much or any financial return, but it could still be a good social project to support a small number of people into housing. And if we've got no better use for the land, I think even at that point, it's good social return and wise investment of what we have would otherwise be an empty piece of land sitting there not being used. So I just want to keep those sort of things in balance as we're making a decision, being realistic that, you know, things may turn and may not work out the way we expect. And we may have to see this, that there are multiple advantages and they're not all financial, and to keep that in mind. So what questions do we have?
Who's going to be first? I've got a few here, Joe. Some of them I think you've answered. There was mention in the brochure of government capital funding. That would be good if we could get some government capital funding, but would that be by the way of a grant or a loan? If we can reduce the borrowing, fine.
Yeah. At this point, I haven't fully explored government capital loans because the diocese have come to the party and offered a loan. From what I understand, there's not much available that we would get access to when it comes to a grant from the government. But if we had partnered with government housing like Kianga Ora, we could potentially get a loan through them as well, but then we would be tied into partnering with them, which would limit who came into the housing.
I think we're better to steer away from government funding. If we can get it through the diocese, then we keep it in-house. And I think that's better for us in the long run.
And for sure, if the opportunity comes up that we can get a grant rather than a loan from somewhere, I'd definitely explore it.
Yeah, a grant would be fine.
Yep.
Mm.
Right, the next question, I think you've covered that one, because if we're borrowing 100% on today's values, if somewhere down the track, when if we have to dispose of it, and I don't think we will, there could be a shortfall at that point, which means the shortfall in equity has got to be made up from something. You've covered the interest one, because interest rates, I would think, change, knowing that the diocese board of trustees or finance people, they'll be up to get every penny they can. So I would think that there'll probably be something built into the loan that there will be interest reviewed at certain points on the way through.
Yeah.
The way they're going at the moment, these could increase. Then I presume these little cottages will accommodate perhaps 2 people, husband and wife.
They could, although I think potentially the idea would be to look at those by themselves, because that way we are providing community for those who would otherwise be without. But definitely the indication from the Christchurch Methodist Mission would be a preference for a 2-bedroom. So not having to change the footprint much from what we're currently looking at, but 2-bedroom would be preferable, and it would give the ability to be flexible around 2 adults being in the house, or a parent and child if need be in the future, if those options were explored.
Good. The next one is car parking space. We need to provide for that, and also we've got to bear in mind with electric cars coming, we'll need to provide provision for people to charge their cars up. I'll just raise that one here with Ashwood, actually, because tomorrow somebody could come in and occupy a unit and they put an electric car. Rents, I think that's good to see it. The government will pick up a shortfall, because I was concerned about the rent compared to, say, minimum income for retired people would probably, for Super Ann, one person on their own would be 403 a week before tax. So there would be a shortfall there. Then they've got to provide for groceries and other costs as well.
Yeah.
I looked at the break-even point, and if that mortgage was at 12 years, we would have no surplus for the parish, but at 15 years, we got 73,000. So somewhere between 12 and 15 years, we're going to have a break-even point.
With
so
the low interest rate, yes.
Yeah, so that's something to bear in mind, because I hope people don't think that, wacko, we're going to have 73 grand to splash around. We're not. But I don't know where the break-even point is. I haven't sat down and worked it out. So that was that one. So that's sort of covered most of the points. Now, Dot's got 1 or 2 questions.
Hello, Joe.
Hello, Dot.
You talked before about helping with people's maintenance. If these buildings are being rented, would not the parish be responsible for maintenance?
Most of it will be covered by the Christchurch Methodist Mission, and they take that into account as part of the agreement. So I'm not sure at this point whether we pay them part of the income to take care of maintenance, or whether they hold on to a part of the income for maintenance. But either way, we would need to ensure that we retained a certain percentage for ongoing maintenance. But generally, from what I understand, the Christchurch Methodist Mission would book that in and provide the maintenance and management of that.
Do we need to explore that with the diocese too?
No.
Why?
The maintenance costs will come out of the income.
Right. Okay.
So there's no need for any further loan. We just put aside a certain amount of the income each year towards maintenance, and that is built into that budget.
Right. The other thing was thinking, if things turn to custard, those houses would be easily be sold.
Yep, and potentially at more than what we paid for them.
Yes.
With the way the market is going.
Yeah.
So I don't see us making a loss. Of course, we own the land, so it just means the whole project is more viable. I think the biggest area of concern would be around government providing top up to rental income. Oh, sorry, yeah,
Yes,
that
yes.
rental cost. They
Yes.
may in the future decide to stop providing that top up to community housing providers.
Yes.
That's probably, I think, the biggest threat.
Risk.
Yeah, biggest risk. Yep.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Joe.
Just to go back to GST one, Joe, this will be domestic rental, so we wouldn't be paying any GST on the income, and then we wouldn't be claiming GST on the expenses, I wouldn't think.
Correct.
That we need to clarify that one.
No.
What about GST on the capital cost?
It wouldn't be.
I don't believe so. From what I've been told by the diocese, there's no GST.
Oh, good.
I am wanting to clarify that. That's what I've been told,
Good.
and I was told that twice, but I still want to get it clarified a third time just to ensure that I'm understanding it fully correctly.
Right.
No more questions, Your Honour.
Joe, you've had the ones from me, and I think you've been covering them on the way through.
Yeah, you're happy with those answers?
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
And Joe, I just had a question out of interest. Who would oversee your whole process, like the consent and the building process? Who would be doing that?
Yeah, probably me.
Good luck.
Yeah. I guess once the parish goes through the special general meeting and decides that we're definitely going to go ahead with this, it would be ideal to put a small team of 3, maybe 4 people together who can help provide oversight for the project, just so one, it's not all on my shoulders, but it means that that knowledge is shared in case something happens to me, but also to share a little bit of the workload as well. Yeah.
100%. I think that would be, a small committee would be a sound idea, Joe, and one you need to investigate.
Yeah.
Because you can't take the whole responsibility on your shoulders. You've got enough to do.
So would
Gordon
Glenroy
has
Housing?
spoken.
So would Glenroy Housing merely provide like a portable unit that gets placed on the piles? Is that the idea? Much like David Rate and those sorts of homes?
Yes, very similar.
Yeah.
I do need to, once we go ahead, talk to another housing builder company just to get comparison costing. Glenroy, I do like the model of home they've got. I think it is similar to David Rate, but it's pre-constructed off-site. Well, not fully constructed, it's panels. So all the panels are made off-site and assembled on-site. So cuts down construction on-site and disturbance on-site. But also the type of build that they offer with the panels, they're extremely earthquake durable, and that was proven in the Christchurch earthquake, earthquakes, and they're a low maintenance sort of home. So no wallpapering, no jib that gets chipped or broken on the corners. It's all wood, which has got a laminate finish on top. And so generally they can just, those walls can be wiped down and kept clean. No repainting, no damaged walls, not easily. So potentially again, keeping maintenance low, but being a healthy and environmentally friendly home.
Cool.
Joe, the house I lived in at Maukuri was prefabricated off-site, built in 3 weeks, and it's still very sound.
Yep. And I think New Zealand's going to start seeing more and more alternative ways of building houses, just because of cost issues, regulation, that prefabricated buildings are becoming more of a norm.
Yeah.
Okay. Joe, I've got a couple of questions for you.
Okay.
Okay. The costs that you've done for the buildings, does that include all the council costs? Or
So I used a budget of $200,000 per house. We may be looking at a bit more than that, but I also factored in $50,000 of other fees. And then I've also done the budget on both $650,000 and $700,000. So,
Okay, so in theory, those costs are covered in your budgeting.
yeah,
Cool.
I believe so.
Okay. I guess you've got to look at wheelchair access for them as well.
Potentially, we could look at, I can't remember, there's a specific code which can be used to for building homes for accessibility, which could mean wider doors and ramps sort of access. So we could look at that as part of the build. I have been advised though by, I think it was Christchurch Methodist Mission, that it's ideal to, we could try and put that sort of stuff in. It's not necessary. However, if we do put it in, it's easy to just put it in and not try and meet the full accreditation for that, that, what do you call it?
Yeah,
Seal of
okay.
approval.
I know what you mean.
Yeah. So we could definitely put wide doors in and put ramps in and have good accessibility without meeting the accreditation that
Right.
would require extra.
Okay. What else I'll get here? What if the tenants damage or trash the homes? Who looks after that?
I'd have to clarify for sure with the Christchurch Methodist Mission on how all maintenance is going to be covered. As I say, there is a budget there for maintenance, which will come out of the income, and that would hopefully cover all costs. Potentially, if it was major damage, would have to be covered by insurance. Yeah, hopefully that would cover most things.
And with any mortgage, you've got to have insurance.
Okay,
So that
and
would
my
cover all
last
that.
one is, last one for me. Yep. Okay, Joe, another one. What is the endowment fund generally used for?
Sorry, say that again.
What is the endowment fund usually used for?
Right. So the parish has what we call an endowment fund, or all the parishes have them. And what it is a collection of trust funds that have happened over the years in each parish. And what happened a number of years ago is the diocese consolidated those trust funds which were sort of general purpose. And so the general endowment is a general purpose trust fund for the parish, and it provides a small income of a couple of $1,000s each year, which we use in our budget just to help cover expenses. It just becomes a little bit of income to help towards everything. So if we use the general endowment, we would lose a couple of $1,000s. However, we've still got the option of taking a percentage of the income each year from the project to replace that. And it would potentially decrease the number of years of the loan, which would bring a full return on investment quicker.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's all.
Joe, I'm just wondering about, if you put a second dwelling on a property, that your rates, etc., increase. Is that the case with the 3 or 4 dwellings?
Yes, it will be. And again, in the budget, we've included rates for each house. So yeah, it will increase the overall rates. Yeah, so that is included in the budget.
Joe, have you done any work on surveying that piece of land as being okay to put houses on?
I have spoken with one of the council's building, what do they call them?
Inspector?
Inspectors, yep. And the initial investigation, they said that they could see no issue with us building houses on the property.
Right.
The one thing that they would potentially stipulate would be a soundproof wall on the far end closest to the road of any house built there, just because of the close proximity to traffic.
Road noise, yeah.
So that's just a,
Yep.
a building issue. But
Mm.
nothing else was indicated as being a problem. But again,
Right.
once we move forward with this project, then we really have some big discussions with council to make sure that it is remains viable. However, in saying that,
Mm.
council are desperate for land for housing at the moment, so
Yeah.
I wouldn't see that in a residential area like this that we would have a problem.
Mm. And what about the grass that's there and the trees that are there? Would you take all of that away and gravel it or bitumix it or?
So we'll probably just gravel, same as the rest of the car park.
Right.
And coming back to Walter's question around car parking, that would need to be included in whether it goes,
Mhm.
you know, a car park for each house, whether it goes beside each house, or whether we have a little car park area of 3 or 4 car parks off to the side. We would have to work through advantages and pros and cons both ways. But the trees that are there currently, we would have to move at least the 3 established trees, so the bigger ones,
Right.
further to the left, so towards the flagpole and the entrance.
Yeah.
My
And
plan
the
would,
fruit, sorry, the
Oh.
fruit trees that Brian put in, what, you know, I mean, they were a donated thing. Would you move those to protect them as well?
yes, well, very potentially it would depend on what land was being used.
Mm.
Right.
But definitely want to keep those trees out there if we can. They just may have to be moved a little
Yes.
bit.
Yeah.
The plan is to keep as much of the grass directly in front of the church still grass. So the whole housing
Right.
development will be off to the right hand side, or you know, towards the backpackers side,
Mhm.
which is next to the vicarage. So we're still going to have good line of sight through the car park to the church, and
Yeah.
these houses will be off towards the fence. Yeah, in line with the vicarage.
Good. Thank you.
Joe, just going back to Lynn's question about the land and perhaps engineers' reports, etc. I just wonder where the septic tank is located. You know, when they changed over in the early 2000s. Just wondering if it might be in that front page.
Um,
Mm.
I do know there's a septic tank at the back end of our property behind the hall.
Mm.
I am unaware of any tank at the front, but in saying that, there was obviously the original vicarage was placed there.
Mm.
But I would expect there'll be ways to get around all of it if it comes down to it. Just might be a little bit more of a cost.
Yeah, it was the cost I was thinking of. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the water pipes that we've got through at the moment are only about 40 centimeters deep, and be a nice easy connection from the water. I'm not sure about sewage and wastewater where they run.
Could be a cost, that one.
Any other thoughts or questions?
Right.
Joe, I was just thinking about the buildings themselves, because all doors need to be wide enough for wheelchairs.
Yeah, so we could definitely look at that as an option, both for the internal and external doors. And it would make sense to build that way to start with, but it is not a requirement for what we do. And yeah, Christchurch Methodist Mission have indicated that they would not need it to be a requirement for them renting those homes.
Right. I was just thinking that the flats at Purcell were good because they had wide doors.
Yeah,
They were really good to work with. And also, I was also thinking about the bedroom, the bathroom. The showers probably need to be walk-in and not a cubicle.
yeah, no, that's a good point. So I do want to do a bit of investigation around accessibility in the design, and I'm hoping Glenroy or whoever we use will have that experience and knowledge as well to help with that.
And they would also need rails.
Yeah, you must know that.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yep,
Yep.
all that can be sorted.
Joe, just thinking about the process.
Yep.
And what the consent in the building, project managing might entail. Just out of interest, have you got backup from the diocese, where have you got people that can help you through that process? Because it's always a much bigger job than we think it's going to be. And I'm just thinking of your role as a minister versus project manager, and the conflict
Yeah,
of that,
yep.
and the time it's going to take. Because I do feel that anyone taking it on, you want people with experience and expertise to advise you or help you through that process, because it's overwhelming, the paperwork and the ticking the boxes. And
Christchurch Methodist Mission have experience in building houses, and they would offer some help. In the diocese itself, we've got a couple of people who have experience with rental properties and tenancy who could provide some help there. But when it comes to project management for a fresh build, I would have to explore that. I do know a couple of people here in Blenheim who are builders or have been in that industry in the past, who would be able to provide advice from time to time, but wouldn't be available for long-term sort of project management, but could definitely help with it with advice. Yeah, and being kit set build does make the whole project a bit easier too, potentially. Yeah. So just going back to a few of the other thoughts from Dot, as much as we're sort of potentially looking at those by themselves and those who may be retired, we cannot run a home which requires full-time care. So they're not going to be a retirement village sort of project. It is considered just a standard rental house, which is tailored, for the retired or whoever. But as soon as it gets to the point of providing certain services, we're classed as a retirement home, and then we need to meet a whole lot of other obligations and expectations which are just not doable. So providing in-home care and things like that is not intended.
No, I'm not thinking about that, Joe. What I am thinking about, you're proposing elderly people will be renting these houses.
Yeah.
And they are going to get older and more.
Absolutely. So accessibility is definitely part of what we're going to be looking at. And
certainly bathroom safety, I know that.
Yeah, yep, that makes full sense. So we'll take that into account for sure.
I mean, it may well entail extra cost, but it would probably be wise to do it anyway, because it's not just elderly who might require disability access. And in fact, that would, you're definitely helping people then by providing anyone that requires disability access that's opening up, who could be used for.
Yeah, that for sure. Any other thoughts or questions? Cool. Well, if anything else occurs to you, please do get in contact. I'm going to make this video available for the rest of the parish to watch and look at, because as I said at the beginning, it's important that everybody understands what's behind the project, as well as the finances, the vision, the implications as well. So wanting some good engagement and for people to be prepared when it comes to the special general meeting. Yeah. So thank you for your time. As I say, if you've got any other thoughts or questions, let me know. Otherwise, have a good evening.